Stainless Docs is the fastest way to get a complete documentation site with API reference, SDK reference, and prose content all in one place. In this video, I'm going to show you how to build a site like this, or this, as well as how to customize it and deploy it to Stainless in just a few minutes. We'll begin inside of the Stainless dashboard. Now, of course, you can create a doc site with just an open API spec, and that site will contain auto-generated API reference information. But the real power of Stainless Docs is the tight integration between the auto-generated API reference as well as the auto-generated SDK reference sourced from your Stainless SDKs. So to that end, we're going to begin with a project that already has a TypeScript SDK pre-configured. From here, we'll head over to the API Docs tab. We'll press Get Started to create our API Docs site. Here you can see a temporary domain has been assigned to our project, and a repo has been created that we've been invited to containing the source code for our API Docs site. Your first build should probably take around a minute or so, but of course for the purposes of this video, I've cut that bit short. Now you can see all of your build history in this table here, but you can also see your live site as soon as your first build completes by clicking on its domain. When you visit your Stainless Docs site immediately after it's been built, you'll see of course there's some customization we have to do, but you'll also notice that the framework gives you a ton for free out of the box. First thing you'll notice is that there's two tabs on your site. The first is a guide section pre-filled with some introductory information about the framework, and the second is an API reference tab. Let's quickly take a closer look at our API reference tab. I'll go over to one of the entries in the sidebar, which maps to one of the endpoints in our REST API. And you can see this is pretty solid documentation for our REST API sourced from our Open API spec. But what makes Stainless Docs really cool, of course, is the SDK's integration. So I'll go over here and change the language to TypeScript. And you can see the entire context of the docs has changed. The parameters and the return type are both TypeScript types, and of course, the code sample here is reflective of our TypeScript SDK. One final thing to mention before we move on to customizing your site is that Stainless Docs was built from the ground up to be consumed by humans as well as LLMs. What this means in practice is that in addition to rendering a complete web page for every SDK method, we also render that as Markdown. The Markdown that we generate here is really thoughtful about LLM context. We're only showing the reference information for the specific method in the specific language that your user cares about. Of course, you can put this directly into an LLM, but we also think this is a great starting point for you to build your own AI integrations alongside your API. So let's move on to actually customizing our site. We'll close out of this and head back to the Stainless dashboard. From here, you can see a link to the repository we created containing your doc site. Let's go ahead and clone the site. I'll grab the Git URL and I'll head over to my terminal. The first thing we're going to want to do is install the dependencies. I'll do that with pnpm install. And once that's done, let's open up a text editor to see what's actually going on here. So now that we're in the project, let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside. The first thing you'll notice is your Astro config file. Stainless Doc sites are actually just Astro projects, so the main configuration for your site happens inside of your astroconfig.ts file. The other things you'll notice here, of course, a package.json file. This is where we specify all the dependencies. You'll see a theme.css file with your CSS variables, as well as a source directory containing a bunch of MDX files for your prose content. So the first thing we want to do is set a logo for our site. So I'll head back to my IDE, and I'm going to want to drag a logo that I've already got somewhere on my disk into the assets directory. You can see the logo should up here. And from there, I'm going to want to set a logo property inside of my Stainless Docs config. There we go. That looks right. I'll press save. You can see the site hot reloads in the background, and my new logo has been applied. The next thing I'd like to do is update at least one of the theme colors on the site. You can see here by default we use a blue that doesn't really match the To Do Ninja logo. So I'll go back to my project, I'll go to theme.css, I'll just replace that initial variable with a color that more matches our brand. So the final thing I want to customize is that I want to remove some of the placeholder content on this prose page. Now, with Stainless Docs, you can author prose pages in MDX, MarkDoc, Markdown, or even just HTML. In our case, if I head back to my project and then open up the corresponding index.mdx file, I can just replace this with a nice introduction to the API that's not just placeholder content. That looks pretty solid, but it does look a little bit bare. So if I head back into the editor, you can see I've left a comment here that says it would be really nice if we could add a cool interactive element to the page. And with Stainless Docs, that's pretty easy. That's because we include React out of the box. Let's go ahead and create a components folder inside of our source directory. You don't actually have to place the component here. We could really place it anywhere, but the components folder is as good of a place as any. I'll call this to-do demo.tsx, and I'll paste in the contents of our React component here. You can see this is a pretty straightforward React component, but it does have some client-side interactivity. It's also worth noting at this point that you can install any NPM package and use it inside of your Stainless Docs site. So if there's a React component library that you're already using and that you already like, feel free to just add that to your site yourself. But again, for the purpose of this guide, we'll just stick with this to-do demo component. I'll go back to my index.mdx file, and that looks right to me. Final thing I'll do is I'll add this to-do demo React component here. The final thing we want to do is set client load, which basically tells Astro, the framework underlying Stainless Docs, that we want to render this component not just on the server, but also on the client. So go back here, and you can see there's a nice client interactive widget on our DocSite homepage. So we've added a logo, we've changed some styling, we've replaced the placeholder markdown text, and we've added some client-side interactivity with React. I think the final thing to do is close out of our dev server. We'll just check the git status. That looks right to me. Git add. We'll say maybe initial improvements. And we'll push that up to the main branch. So let's head back to the Stainless dashboard. And you can see we've got a build that just kicked off. I'll click in here. And you can see the real-time status of your build as it's going, including all the same logs you'd see in your terminal. And once the build's complete, we can head back here, click on the DocSite link, and you can see the site is live with the changes that we just made. It's also worth calling out that your site deploys not only on every push to main, but also whenever your API or SDKs change. So your API reference is always up to date.